There was a house on the edge of a quiet lane, where the hedges leaned inward as though they too were trying to keep a secret. Dust lay thick upon its roof, and ivy traced long green sighs down the stone walls. At its highest corner was a little attic, with a window shaped almost like a sideways tear. In that room sat an old television, squat and heavy, its frame polished smooth by time. On certain nights, when the air outside was heavy with mist, the screen would glow even though no one had touched it. It didn't play programs exactly. It offered flickers, whispers of people laughing in languages you couldn't place, or a sky that didn't match the one above your town. I first saw that light when I was a child, standing on tiptoe to peer through the crack of the attic door. My heart thudded as if I had stumbled upon a nest of birds and might scare them away with a breath too loud. Behind me the house was silent, except for the patient tick of an old hallway clock. I remember the faint smell of cedar and warm dust, the way moonlight pooled around my bare feet. Something about the hush of that room made me believe the television wasn't a machine at all, but a doorway, a keeper of soft stories waiting to be heard. A man lived below those creaking stairs. Mr. Calloway, though most called him the signal keeper. He wasn't related to us, though he had been a friend of my grandfather. He walked with a cane polished from years of steady use, and his voice was a low, rumbling kindness. Sometimes he would invite me up the narrow ladder, warning me that the set liked to choose its moments. We would sit together, knees nearly touching, while the screen breathed out faint blue light. "Not everything worth watching shouts," he once said, eyes reflecting the glow. "Some things hum." The hum was soft enough that you felt it more than heard it, as though the attic itself was purring. Little shapes appeared in the static, not quite faces, not quite clouds. I watched, spellbound, while Mr. Calloway kept a steady hand on my shoulder. Every so often the images cleared for a heartbeat, revealing scenes that belonged nowhere near our street. A boy watering enormous violets, an elderly woman writing letters to the wind, a small dog waiting patiently beside a moonlit canal. They vanished as gently as they came, leaving ripples in the dark. I asked once if the people inside knew we were watching. Mr. Calloway tilted his head, smiling in a way that was more about listening than answering. "Perhaps," he said, "but they aren't here to be spied upon. They're reminders, little echoes telling us the world is wider and kinder than we sometimes remember." He always spoke like that, as if words were something you were meant to cup in your hands, not throw around. When the glow faded, we would descend the ladder slowly, as if stepping out of a church after a long prayer. Downstairs smelled of chamomile tea and lemon polish. My mother would be reading by the fireplace, pretending she hadn't noticed where I'd been. She trusted Mr. Calloway, and perhaps the way my shoulders seemed lighter after those visits. There was no danger in his attic, only a calm curiosity, like learning a lullaby you couldn't quite finish humming. One late winter evening, a storm grumbled outside, rain tapped gently at the window panes, and the air was sweet with petrichor. Mr. Calloway beckoned me upstairs once more. The television was already alive, casting slow silver waves across the beams. He motioned for me to sit closer than usual, his eyes thoughtful. "Sometimes," he murmured, "the stories come looking for someone. Tonight I think they might be calling you." I felt warmth gather in my chest, half wonder, half nervousness. The screen shimmered, and for an instant I saw myself, or someone very like me, standing on a bridge made of mist, holding a lantern that pulsed like a heartbeat. The figure turned as though aware of being seen, and the picture dissolved before I could breathe. I looked at Mr. Calloway, startled. He only squeezed my shoulder, steady as stone. "Don't be afraid," he said. "They're only showing you a piece of tomorrow." That night I lay awake, the attic light flickering through the crack beneath my bedroom door. I thought about the faces, the bridge, the way the images seemed stitched together by something gentler than logic. Part of me longed to climb back up and sit in the silver glow until morning, but sleep tugged me under with a promise of its own. My dreams were quiet, like pages turning in a book I hadn't written yet. When dawn softened the curtains, I woke to the sound of rain easing into silence. Downstairs, Mr. Calloway hummed to himself while setting the kettle on the stove. The television sat dark in the attic, but I felt its presence the way you feel warmth after a friend leaves the room. Something in me understood, though I couldn't have said how, that the story had begun and that I was part of it, whether or not I ever saw that glowing bridge again. In the years that followed, I would remember that first night whenever the world felt too small or too sharp. It taught me that even in the most ordinary corners of our lives, there might be a door waiting to open, asking only for quiet attention. And though I didn't yet know it, the echoes hidden inside that old screen were gathering threads that would one day shape the person I was meant to become. Morning stretched over the house like a pale ribbon, slow and unhurried. Mr. Calloway poured tea into 2 mismatched mugs, steam curling as if it wanted to sketch little clouds above the table. He asked if I had slept well, and though I nodded, I wasn't sure if what I'd done was truly sleep or some half-waking drift through quiet corridors. There was a softness in the air, the way there is after a snowfall, though no snow had fallen. Outside, the garden wore a sheen of rain, and every leaf held a trembling bead of light. After breakfast, he suggested we take a walk, so we wandered down the lane, our boots brushing against damp grass. He walked slowly, leaning on his polished cane, letting me match his rhythm. Birds stitched a low melody between hedges, and somewhere far off a dog barked with the joy of morning. I kept thinking about the figure I had seen on the screen the night before, a version of myself holding a lantern on a bridge that wasn't real and yet felt more solid than the stones beneath my feet. I wanted to ask about it, but each time I opened my mouth, the question dissolved into the misty air. Instead, I asked how long he had lived with the television. He chuckled, the sound warm and rumbling, like water rolling over smooth stones. "Longer than I can measure," he said. "It found me when I was younger than you are now. I thought it was a toy at first, then a mystery, then a companion. Maybe it's all of those." His eyes turned toward the horizon, where pale sunlight broke through a thin curtain of cloud. "It shows you only what you're ready to notice. Sometimes that's a place, sometimes a feeling. Sometimes, if you're very quiet inside, it shows you yourself." We reached a low wooden fence that bordered a meadow, and he rested there looking out over grass that shimmered with tiny drops. He spoke about listening not just to people but to spaces, to silences, to the way air carries meaning if you let it. I watched his profile, the weathered lines of his face softened by morning light. Something in him felt as steady as the oak trees behind us. I realized that my visits to his attic were not only about the television, they were about learning a kind of patience, a way of noticing the invisible threads that stitched one moment to another. Later, in the attic, the air was cool but friendly, full of the scent of timber warmed by old sun. The screen remained dark, as though waiting. Mr. Calloway brushed a bit of dust from the top and sat down with a small sigh. "The set isn't a servant," he said, glancing at me with a smile that carried a quiet warning. "It chooses when to speak. We don't coax it, we accompany it." I nodded, folding my hands in my lap. We sat like that for a long while, sharing an unspoken agreement not to rush whatever might come. Eventually a faint tremor shivered across the glass, no brighter than moonlight on water. Shapes formed slowly, a hallway lined with doors, each one painted a different shade of blue. The image held steady long enough for me to sense something waiting beyond those doors, not voices, exactly, more like feelings leaning close. My breath caught. I had the sudden urge to step forward, to see where the hallway led, though I knew my feet were still planted on the attic rug. The television dimmed, leaving behind a peaceful hush. That afternoon, after my mother came to collect me, I walked home with the meadow wind on my cheeks. The village looked different, not in its bricks or rooftops, but in its quiet heartbeat. Even the lampposts seemed alive with a kind of listening. I thought about the hallway behind the glass, about the doors waiting for someone brave enough to knock. A tender certainty grew inside me. The world was vaster and kinder than I had ever let myself believe. Days turned into weeks, and I visited Mr. Calloway whenever school left me free. Sometimes the television showed nothing, and we would simply sit in the golden air, speaking in murmurs about books or the shapes of clouds. Other times it offered fragments. A girl skipping stones across a violet lake, a baker handing out bread to strangers in a snowstorm, a fox curling beside a sleeping child. None of these visions were loud or demanding. They were like seeds, tiny and complete, waiting for someone to carry them carefully. One evening, when the sky was a pale lavender, Mr. Calloway told me a story about the first image he ever saw inside the set. He described a little boy crouched at the edge of a forest, coaxing a wounded bird back to health with crumbs of bread. "I watched him for weeks," he said, voice softened by memory. "It taught me something I couldn't explain then, that attention itself can heal. You don't always need answers. You need to keep someone company until they remember their own strength." I turned that thought over and over as we sat there. Attention as a kind of medicine. It sounded simple, yet it filled me with quiet awe. Perhaps the images were not lessons in the strict sense, but mirrors gently tilted toward our better selves. And perhaps Mr. Calloway had spent a lifetime learning how to stand still, long enough for those mirrors to speak. When I left that night, the moon had risen, round and calm above the rooftops. I felt its light settle across my shoulders like a shawl. At my bedroom window I lingered, looking toward the attic where I knew Mr. Calloway was still keeping watch. A single warm glow spilled from under the eaves, steady as a heartbeat. I closed my eyes and imagined the hallway of blue doors, patient and unhurried, waiting for me whenever I was ready. The days of that spring were filled with a kind of quiet anticipation, like the pause between the breath and the song. I walked to Mr. Calloway's cottage almost every afternoon, my school satchel swinging against my side, a secret weight in its pocket where I kept a notebook for sketches of what I had seen. The path became a ritual, past the post office with its brass bell, across the bridge where minnows darted in silver clusters, up to the ivy-wrapped door that smelled faintly of rain. Each time I climbed the ladder to the attic, I felt a hush settle around me, as if the room were aware of my arrival. One afternoon, the screen greeted us with a low pulse of light. We sat cross-legged on the rug, the dust motes around us spinning like tiny planets. Slowly, an image formed, a Akin bathed in golden lamplight, where an elderly woman stood kneading dough. The scene was unremarkable, and yet full of something I couldn't name. She hummed as she worked, her hands sure and gentle. A younger figure entered, a boy with sleepy eyes, and she brushed flour from her palms before cupping his cheek. I felt an ache, tender and unfamiliar, as though I were missing someone I had never met. When the glow faded, I asked Mr. Calloway who they were. He gave a small shrug, smiling with his eyes. "Someone's kindness," he said softly. "That's all we ever really see, kindness caught in its own light." We sat for a while longer, neither of us speaking. The stillness felt like a blessing, a pause that allowed my thoughts to settle into clearer shapes. Later that week, the television showed something entirely different, a rowboat drifting through mist, a lantern swaying at its bow, a figure rowed slowly, face hidden beneath a hood. I felt the pull of that image, a tug somewhere behind my ribs. Mr. Calloway noticed and rested a hand on my shoulder. "Not everything inside is meant to be solved," he said. "Some things are invitations. You don't have to answer them all at once." At school, my friends talked about football and summer fairs, but my mind wandered to boats and lanterns, to kitchens warm with unseen music. I found myself noticing small gestures everywhere, the way the librarian straightened fallen books, how the grocer tucked a sprig of mint into a paper bag for an old man with tired hands. These details seemed to shimmer as if the television had tuned my eyes to frequencies of gentleness. One rainy evening, the set revealed a new vision, a path beneath an arch of flowering trees. Petals drifted down like slow snow. In the center stood a child, holding a paper bird. They looked up at me, or at least it felt that way, and smiled, the attic filled with the fragrance of blossoms. Though none were there, I thought of asking Mr. Calloway what it meant, but instead I simply breathed, letting the quiet fold around me. That night, lying in bed, I traced constellations on the ceiling with my eyes. I felt grateful for the secret that belonged to only a few of us. The knowledge that somewhere kindness was being stored, waiting for whoever might need it next. Summer pressed close against the village, soft and green. Bees trailed lazy loops over the clover, and the brook ran warm between stones polished by long seasons. Mr. Calloway's cottage smelled of thyme and freshly baked bread. When I arrived one morning, he was in the garden, tying up the climbing roses. "The set's been restless today," he said, wiping soil from his palms. "Shall we see what it has to say?" The attic was bright with sunlight pouring through the tear-shaped window. The television stood quiet, but a low warmth pulsed through the wooden floorboards. I sat while Mr. Calloway adjusted the aerial with practiced care. Soon the screen bloomed into a soft scene, a small workshop where clocks of every size ticked in patient unison. At the center, a man bent over a table, polishing gears with deliberate grace. His hands moved with a rhythm that seemed to belong to the heartbeat of the world. We watched as he assembled a tiny watch, placing its face against his ear before setting it in a row of finished pieces. Then he looked directly toward us, or so it felt, and smiled as though he had been expecting visitors. I heard, or imagined I heard, the faintest murmur, a sound like the promise of time given freely. Mr. Calloway leaned forward, eyes alight. "Ah," he whispered, "the clockmaker." For days afterward, I thought about the workshop. I wondered whether the man mended not just timepieces, but the hours themselves, smoothing the wrinkles of lonely evenings, stitching laughter back into forgotten afternoons. The idea settled in me like a stone in a riverbed, quiet but steady. A week later, I arrived to find the attic already alive with color. Swirls of blue and amber played across the screen, forming a wide meadow dotted with low lanterns. A child and an animal, perhaps a fox, were curled together in the grass, breathing in the same slow rhythm. It felt sacred to witness their rest. Mr. Calloway placed a finger to his lips, and we stayed that way until the vision faded. He began telling me about his own boyhood, how he had once sat exactly where I sat, legs folded, heart open. "I thought I was just watching stories," he said, "but they were watching me back, teaching me how to stay gentle even when the world grew loud." His gaze softened. "Kindness is a skill you practice, just like winding a clock." That evening I walked home through air thick with the scent of roses. Street lamps flickered on one by one, scattering amber halos across the cobblestones. I felt as though the day itself was offering me a lantern, lighting the way for the person I was still becoming. When I reached my room, I placed my notebook beside the window, leaving its pages open to the sky. I hoped the stars might find their way in, leaving a little silver dust between the lines. Sleep came slowly but sweetly. My last thought before drifting off was of the clockmaker smiling, steady hands holding time as if it was something tender enough to cradle. That summer afternoon was heavy with the scent of cut grass and warm stone. When I arrived, Mr. Calloway was seated by the open window, his cane resting against the sill. Sunlight pooled across the wooden floor, and motes of dust drifted through the air like faint stars. He beckoned me closer with a quiet smile. "The set's in a gentle mood," he said, voice low. "It wants us to take our time today." We climbed the ladder to the attic, each step a note in an unspoken melody. The screen waited, dark but expectant. We settled on the rug, letting the hush of the room gather around us. Slowly a glow stirred, the color of morning mist. A landscape unfolded, rollings under a sky painted in tender pastels. In the distance, a solitary figure walked along a path bordered by lanterns. They carried a satchel filled with feathers, each one catching the light. As they passed, the lantern flames leaned toward them, as if curious about where the feathers might fly. Mr. Calloway spoke quietly, almost to himself. "Some people move through the world collecting small mercies," he said. "They carry them until someone else is ready." I watched the figure fade beyond the horizon and felt a warmth rise in my chest, an understanding too new to name. The scene dissolved, leaving behind a hush scented faintly with wood smoke and early rain. Afterward we shared tea, sipping slowly as afternoon softened toward evening. I asked whether he had ever met anyone from inside the pictures. He laughed gently. "No, child," he said, eyes twinkling. "But I've recognized them, or pieces of them, in the people I've loved. That's the trick of it. The stories aren't far away at all. They're reminders of what we carry in secret." In the following days, I began to notice my own quiet mercies. I paused longer to hold the door for neighbors or to listen when someone's words trailed off. A kindness would flicker in me, and I'd imagine slipping it into an invisible satchel. The more I noticed, the easier it became, like finding a rhythm I had always known. One evening, the set showed us a small bakery tucked beneath an arch of ivy. A boy stood behind the counter, carefully wrapping loaves while his grandmother arranged candles in the window. Their smiles seemed woven from patience. The smell of bread seemed to drift right out of the screen, filling the attic with warmth. Mr. Calloway leaned back, eyes half closed. "Even bread," he murmured, "can be a prayer." When I went home that night, twilight had turned the village blue. I carried with me a quiet conviction that the simplest acts, offering bread, tending roses, holding a steady gaze, might be the threads holding everything together. Sleep gathered me easily, as if agreeing. Autumn tiptoed into our days with a hush of fallen leaves and the sharp sweetness of apples. The air grew thinner, carrying hints of smoke from distant chimneys. Mr. Calloway welcomed me with wool blankets and mugs of spiced tea. The attic felt different now, cozy and amber-lit, as though it were preparing itself for winter stories. The television waited, screen pale in the dim light, almost like frost on glass. That afternoon it unveiled a forest bathed in twilight. Trees leaned close, their trunks etched with runes that glowed faintly whenever the wind stirred. In a clearing, a young woman knelt beside a fox with silver fur. She whispered something, and the fox blinked, calm and trusting. The scene held us for a long time, until the forest faded and only the scent of pine remained. Mr. Calloway turned to me, his face serious but tender. "The set teaches in murmurs," he said. "It shows you how trust is built, not in thunder but in small, steady moments." His words lingered in the air, threading themselves around the scent of tea and timber. In the weeks that followed, we spent many afternoons together. Sometimes the screen offered stories, sometimes it stayed still, leaving us to fill the silence with talk of books or memories. I learned that Mr. Calloway had once worked as a carpenter, shaping wood into cradles and tables. He spoke of the way grain hides its own map, waiting for hands patient enough to follow it. Listening, I understood why the television had chosen him. He knew how to meet a mystery without rushing to master it. One chilly evening, the glow returned stronger than before. It revealed a small harbor beneath a sky pricked with early stars. Boats rocked gently against their ropes, and a girl stood on the pier, releasing paper lanterns into the wind. Each lantern rose, casting soft circles of light on the water. I felt tears prick my eyes, though I couldn't say why. Mr. Calloway placed his hand over mine. "Steady and kind. Let yourself feel it," he whispered. "That's part of the watching." That night, after saying goodbye, I paused at the edge of the lane. The moon shone through drifting clouds, pale and whole. I thought of the girl on the pier, of feathers and foxes, of bread and steady hands. The images blended, forming a single understanding. The world keeps offering us small lights. All we need to do is notice and carry them forward. I returned home lighter than I had left, as though the lanterns had placed a quiet glow inside me. Curling beneath my quilt, I felt the warmth settle through my ribs, and before sleep claimed me, I whispered a thank you to the stories, to Miss Calloway, to whatever gentle current had decided I was ready. The first frost of winter arrived quietly, coating the village roofs with a delicate lace of ice. I walked to Mr. Calloway's cottage with a careful step, boots crunching softly on frozen grass. Smoke spiraled from chimneys, curling into the pale morning sky, and the air smelled of pine and cold earth. The attic awaited, still and silent, its little window glowing faintly with anticipation. Mr. Calloway greeted me with a nod, his eyes reflecting a warmth that felt almost tangible. "The set has been waiting," he said. "I think today it has something new to share." We settled on the rug, and the television flickered to life, its soft hum threading through the air. The screen displayed a city unlike any I had seen, a place of tall buildings with windows that glimmered like water. People moved along the streets slowly, some carrying bundles of paper, others simply pausing to watch the clouds pass. A boy leaned against a lamppost, sketching shapes in the air with his fingers, and a girl approached him, offering a small bundle of leaves. Their gestures were quiet but full of intention, as if the simplest movements carried a weight of care. Mr. Calloway watched me closely. "Notice how small acts shape everything," he whispered. "The boy and girl are ordinary, yet the world around them responds to their gentleness." I nodded, feeling a warmth spread inside, realizing that the lessons I had been gathering were starting to take root. The scene faded slowly, leaving behind the scent of winter wood and the faint echo of laughter. Later, we walked to the garden, crunching over frosted leaves. Mr. Calloway spoke about his own childhood, about quiet moments that had shaped him, a neighbor's soft voice when he was lost, a fire kept burning late for someone returning home. "It's in these threads," he said, "that life grows steady. Small kindnesses weave the pattern." I listened, letting the words sink deep, and for the first time I felt an understanding that was both gentle and profound. Being present, truly present, could be the most extraordinary thing one could do. The next weeks passed like a slow river, each day carrying its own reflections. The attic became a sanctuary of quiet wonder. Sometimes the television offered glimpses of distant worlds, a village where lanterns floated over frozen lakes, a forest where trees whispered secrets to wandering animals, a rooftop garden where a single cat watched stars blink open. Each vision taught something subtle: patience, care, attention, quiet joy, and I began to notice those qualities in myself. One evening, the screen showed a wide meadow, golden with late afternoon sun. A child stood in the center, holding a small fox kit in their arms. They walked slowly, letting the animal explore the grass with careful nudges. I felt my breath slow, as if matching the rhythm of the child's steps. Mr. Calloway leaned back against the wall, his face serene. "Notice the small patience," he murmured. "It matters more than grand gestures." As the winter deepened, I found myself practicing these lessons outside the attic. I helped a neighbor carry firewood, paused to offer my coat to someone shivering in the street, lingered a moment longer in conversation when someone seemed lonely. The world responded softly, like the faint hum of a remembered melody. I began to sense a thread connecting all these small moments, a quiet network of attention and care that had nothing to do with grand plans or heroic acts. One day, the television revealed a library filled with almost finished stories, volumes with half-written pages and bookmarks stuck between chapters. The children and adults within moved gently among the stacks, reading fragments and smiling quietly. Mr. Calloway explained that these were possibilities, little paths that might never be taken, but still carried their own value. Even the unfinished matters, he said. Every life has pieces worth noticing, even the ones that go unseen. The vision lingered longer than usual, and I felt a gentle pull in my chest, a tug of longing for every story I might never live myself, every kindness I might never witness. Yet it was not sadness, rather a soft awareness of the vastness of small, quiet lives. The room felt larger, as though the attic itself had stretched to accommodate all the unseen moments in the universe. We sat in that stillness, letting the light fade slowly, savoring the hush that remained when the images had vanished. That night, walking home beneath a sky dusted with stars, I felt a steady glow inside me, one that had grown from weeks of quiet watching and gentle noticing. I imagined all the acts of kindness happening elsewhere, in rooms I would never enter, gardens I would never walk through, hands I would never hold. The glow was not mine alone. It belonged to the world, a reminder that attention, presence, and care could ripple farther than I could measure. Lying in bed, I traced constellations on the ceiling, remembering the child with the fox, the library of almost stories, and every faint whisper of light from the attic screen. I realized that the journey was not about the places or the images themselves, but about learning how to carry their essence into my own quiet moments. As sleep claimed me, I felt a sense of belonging to something tender, infinite, and calm, knowing that the threads of small mercies connected everything, one soft heartbeat at a time. The snow began softly that morning, drifting in slow, careless spirals across the village rooftops. I pulled my coat tighter as I made my way to Mr. Calloway's cottage, boots crunching quietly on the frost-coated path. Smoke from chimneys painted the sky with thin grey brushstrokes, and the scent of baking bread mingled with the crisp winter air. Inside, the attic glimmered faintly, the window catching the soft white light like a pearl. Miss Calloway greeted me with a nod, as if acknowledging that the world had grown just a little quieter since last we met. "The set has something gentle for us today," he said. "Pay attention." We sat cross-legged on the rug, letting the room's stillness gather around us. The television shimmered to life, revealing a small sandwich shop tucked beneath a brick archway. Inside, a child ordered a sandwich to an elderly man who looked weary from the cold. The man's eyes softened, a slow smile spreading across his face. Outside, snow continued to drift, but the warmth inside was palpable, reaching through the screen, through the attic, and even, somehow, my chest. Mr. Calloway watched with quiet delight. "Notice the care," he murmured. "Even the smallest offering matters." The scene shifted slowly, showing the same child walking home, carrying a bundle of leftover bread, to a hidden courtyard where a few stray cats waited. I felt a tug of wonder, how something so ordinary could carry such. It was in these small acts, repeated with patience and attention, that the world became tender and alive. The television dimmed, leaving only the faint scent of warm bread and winter pine. In the following days, I noticed small moments in my own life that mirrored the scene. I helped an elderly neighbor gather firewood, smiled at children chasing snowflakes, and lingered in conversation when someone seemed quiet or lonely. Each act felt amplified, as though the universe itself leaned closer to watch, reminding me that gentleness was a quiet but powerful force. Mr. Calloway's lessons were no longer only in the attic. They were woven into my daily steps. One evening, the television displayed a hidden courtyard in a faraway city. Lanterns floated above, casting soft circles of light on the cobblestones. People wandered among the shadows, sometimes pausing to speak to one another, sometimes leaving notes tucked into doorways. The child appeared again, now with a fox curled at their feet, handing small parcels to those who passed. I understood, without words, that attention and care could ripple outward far beyond sight. The images faded slowly, leaving me in a hush filled with light and quiet warmth. That night, walking home beneath a sky scattered with stars, I thought about the child and the fox, about bread and lanterns, about the threads of kindness that wove the world together. I felt the gentle pulse of life in every breath, every movement, and every glance exchanged between strangers. Curling into bed, I traced constellations on the ceiling and whispered a small thank you for the warmth, the care, and the soft, luminous presence of quiet acts. Sleep took me easily, carrying me into dreams that shimmered with light like floating lanterns. Winter deepened, and the nights grew long and still. The attic felt warmer than ever, filled with the glow of the television and the faint smell of wood smoke and tea. Mr. Calloway greeted me with his usual nod, the faintest smile hinting at the stories waiting for us. "The set has been patient," he said. "Tonight we might see something that stays with us longer than usual." I settled on the rug, listening to the hum that vibrated softly through the floorboards, and waited with quiet attention. The screen lit up, showing a small harbor beneath an early starry sky. Boats rocked gently against their ropes, lanterns floating in the water like scattered constellations. A young girl released a paper lantern, and it drifted upwards slowly, catching the starlight. She smiled at a boy waiting beside the pier, and together they let the lantern rise, letting go with careful hands. Mr. Calloway leaned back, eyes softened by the glow. "Notice the patience," he murmured. "It is the bridge between fear and trust." The image shifted to a quiet rooftop garden, where a single cat watched the sky blink open with faint starlight. A pair of friends shared a bench, their laughter slow and soft, carrying through the cool air. I felt the warmth of connection, the gentle hum of being witnessed, and the quiet realization that love does not always roar. Sometimes it exists in small, steady moments, unfolding gently across time. Over the following week, I carried these visions into my days. I lingered to help neighbors, offered small gestures of kindness, and noticed the soft ripple of my actions. Even the smallest smile seemed to grow, stretching into moments of light in ways I could not always measure. The lessons of the attic had taken root, teaching me the rhythm of attention, care, and quiet patience. One evening, the screen revealed a hallway lined with doors painted different shades of blue. Each door held a fragment of a life, waiting quietly for someone to notice. Children peeked through, sharing whispered stories. Adults left letters in mail slots for those they would never meet. I understood then that every small act, every careful gesture, every silent note of attention contributed to the invisible tapestry of the world. Mr. Calloway watched me closely, hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "Even the unnoticed matters," he said. "Pay attention. The world keeps giving." That night, as I lay in bed, the snow outside glimmering faintly in moonlight, I thought of lanterns, foxes, rooftops, and doors. I felt the quiet pulse of the world, the unseen connections, the small kindnesses that stretched across cities and hearts. Sleep embraced me, gentle and unwavering, and I knew that in noticing, in carrying, in giving quietly, I was part of something vast, tender, and enduring. Winter had softened into early spring, and the village breathed with a subtle warmth, the ice of the previous months melting quietly into streams and puddles. I walked to Mr. Calloway's cottage beneath a sky smeared with pale gold, feeling the familiar hush of anticipation settle in my chest. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin spirals, curling lazily into the morning light, and the scent of damp earth mixed with faint blossoms. The attic glimmered softly as always, and I climbed the ladder with careful steps, boots brushing against the worn wood. Mr. Calloway greeted me with a small smile. "The set has been waiting for a moment like this," he said. "It may linger longer today." We sat cross-legged on the rug, letting the stillness wrap around us. The television flickered to life, revealing a small harbor under the glow of a sunrise. Boats floated gently against the soft current, and children ran along the piers, tossing lanterns into the air. Each lantern drifted with its own quiet grace, circling upward, leaving trails of light like delicate threads in the sky. Mr. Calloway leaned back, voice hushed. "Notice the letting go," he said. "Patience and release are gifts to the world as much as attention." I watched the scene, feeling the slow exhale of time, understanding that watching could be its own kind of kindness. Later, the screen showed a hallway lined with doors, each a different shade of green, whispering softly in the hush of the attic. Figures moved slowly between them, leaving notes, folding paper birds, pausing to listen. I felt the quiet pull of their careful acts, the unspoken connections that stretched from one door to another, like a web woven of subtle care. Mr. Calloway placed a hand on my shoulder. "The smallest gestures echo further than we can see," he said. "Sometimes the world notices before we do." That afternoon we lingered longer than usual. We spoke of patience, of the way a single attentive presence could shape a day, a moment, a life. Mr. Calloway told stories of his own youth, when he learned to see the invisible threads, the warmth in a neighbor's gaze, the weight of a silent promise, the hush of a winter morning. Each memory was a quiet lesson in noticing, a reminder that the world's gentle magic is always available if we allow ourselves to pay attention. As I walked home beneath a sky brushed with soft pink, I thought about lanterns, hallways, and the echoes of small gestures. I felt their warmth like a ribbon of light wrapped through the streets, through the trees, through my chest. At home, I placed my notebook by the window, open to a page that I could fill with the quiet memories of the day. Sleep claimed me gently that night, carrying me into dreams where lanterns floated endlessly, paper birds circled endlessly, and kindness threaded the air like a gentle river. Spring deepened, and flowers began to trace the edges of the village streets with tentative color. The attic felt more alive than ever, sunlight streaming through the tear-shaped window, dust motes spinning slowly like tiny galaxies. Mr. Calloway greeted me with his steady warmth. "The set is patient," he said. "Today, it shows us something that might remain in memory long after we leave." We settled on the rug, letting the familiar hush gather between us. The television flickered to life, revealing a library unlike any I had seen before. Shelves stretched endlessly, filled with almost finished stories, books left open in the middle of sentences, pages stuck with bookmarks and pressed flowers. Children and adults moved quietly among the stacks, reading fragments, smiling softly, pausing to share a glance or whisper. The scene felt alive, as though it were breathing slowly in rhythm with the room. Mr. Calloway watched me closely, hand resting lightly on my knee. "Notice the value of what is unfinished," he said. "Even incomplete moments have weight, and even unspoken gestures matter." We lingered, watching a young girl place a small note inside a book, then leave it on a table for someone she might never meet. The smallest kindnesses seemed to multiply within the space, invisible threads connecting every life in subtle, immeasurable ways. I realized that attention, presence, and care were far more profound than I had imagined. They were the silent language that bound the world together. That evening, walking home beneath a sky slowly painted in twilight, I thought of the library, of lanterns and foxes, of bread and rooftops. I understood how small gestures, repeated with care, ripple, otter beyond sight, shaping lives in ways unseen. At my window, I wrote small notes in my notebook, fragments of what I had noticed, whispers of lessons carried from the attic. Sleep came easily, enveloping me in a calm that felt like lantern light, steady and soft, guiding me into dreams where every act of quiet kindness glowed faintly, as if the world itself were keeping watch. The late spring sun warmed the village in long, golden strokes. I walked to Mr. Calloway's cottage along paths softened with grass and sprinkled with the scent of blooming flowers. Birds traced quiet loops the air, and the faint hum of life pulsed through the streets. The attic waited patiently, its little window glowing faintly, promising calm and story. Mr. Calloway greeted me with his usual nod and soft smile. "The set has chosen something delicate for us today," he said. "It will linger in the way quiet things do, if we allow ourselves to notice." We settled on the rug, the hush of the room folding around us. The television flickered, a soft glow spreading across the attic beams. Slowly, the scene emerged. A hilltop village at dawn, streets still empty, lanterns dimmed, but the sky tinged with pale orange. In a courtyard, a young boy tended a small garden, hands gentle and patient, planting seeds in neat rows. Each movement was deliberate, quiet, almost sacred. I felt the rhythm of his care echo through the room, and Miss Calloway's voice, low and steady, reminded me, even the smallest nurturing grows beyond sight. The scene shifted, revealing a small bakery tucked beneath an arch of ivy. A girl swept the floor with careful strokes, humming softly, while her younger brother carried flour to a shelf, spilling a little now and then. Their gestures were simple, unremarkable, yet filled with attention and thought. I realized that life, like the attic, thrives on patience, on acts performed without the need for acknowledgement or applause. The television's glow seemed to infuse the room with a warmth that matched the unfolding day outside, slow and kind. A breeze stirred the window curtains, carrying the scent of early flowers inside. Mr. Calloway leaned back, eyes soft but intent. "Notice how ordinary gestures matter," he whispered. "The way we fold bread, the way we tend a garden, the way we notice someone. These are not small things. They are quiet prayers sent into the world." I nodded, tracing the image of the boy planting seeds in my mind, feeling the pulse of patience in my own chest. The next vision unfolded in a quiet harbor at dusk. Boats bobbed gently, lanterns drifting across water like slow constellations. A pair of friends walked along the pier, tossing small notes tied to tiny lanterns into the river. Each lantern floated upward with gentle grace, carrying messages of hope, gratitude, and care. I felt a deep warmth settle in my chest, the realization that attention, presence, and intention ripple outward in ways we rarely see, yet which shape the world quietly, profoundly, irreversibly. Days turned to weeks, and the attic remained my sanctuary. Sometimes the screen offered glimpses of distant forests where children tended injured animals, villages where quiet acts of generosity shaped entire streets, or kitchens where laughter and gentle conversation filled spaces with warmth. Even when the television remained dark, Mr. Calloway and I sat together, sharing the hush of the attic, speaking in murmurs about life, kindness, and noticing. I began to understand that the essence of the stories was not the images themselves, but the practice of seeing, listening, and feeling. One evening, the television revealed a narrow hallway lined with doors of soft, muted color. Each door contained fragments of everyday life, unnoticed acts, and small gestures that carried weight beyond comprehension. Children peeked through, leaving notes, folding paper cranes, or simply listening with careful attention. Adults moved quietly among them, pausing to share a smile or a kind word. Mr. Calloway placed a hand on my shoulder. "Even the unnoticed matters," he said gently. "Life is stitched together by these small threads." I watched, absorbing the lesson with quiet awe, feeling the pulse of every unseen kindness vibrate through me. The sun dipped behind the horizon, spilling its last amber light across the village streets. Mr. Calloway and I lingered, letting the calm of the attic settle over us like a blanket. "The Thur is vast, but each gesture matters," he said. "Each act of care reaches farther than we imagine." I thought of lanterns floating on a river, foxes curled in gardens, and children planting seeds. Each image, each moment, carried a lesson in attentiveness and gentleness, in noticing what often goes unseen. Walking home beneath a sky dusted with early stars, I felt the quiet pulse of connection in every shadow, every street lamp, every gentle movement in the night. Lanterns drifted through my imagination, carrying fragments of kindness, patience, and attention to places I could not see. I understood that the journey was not about grand gestures, nor about recognition or reward, but about the accumulation of small, deliberate acts, the careful weaving of light through the ordinary, a tapestry visible only to those willing to notice. At my bedroom window I lingered a moment longer, feeling the hush of the world settle across the village. The attic seemed present in the quiet. The television's glow folded into the memory of what I had seen. I placed my notebook on the sill, leaving its pages open to receive the subtle echoes of the day. Sleep arrived softly, carrying me into dreams where lanterns floated endlessly, foxes curled beside children, gardens thrived, and bread carefully baked nourished unseen hearts. The calm of the attic followed me into the night, a quiet reminder that the world is stitched together by unseen threads, each one a pulse of attention and care. As I drifted further into slumber, I whispered a soft thank you for the warmth, for the quiet guidance, and for every small act of gentleness the world holds in secret. Outside, stars blinked softly, the village breathed gently, and somewhere the attic waited with its steady light, patient, enduring, infinite in its quiet lessons. The first hints of summer drifted across the village, carrying scents of lavender, warm earth, and the faint sweetness of ripening berries. I walked to Mr. Calloway's cottage, noticing the way sunlight solid on the cobblestones, highlighting each small imperfection with quiet beauty. Birds traced loops in the sky, their songs soft and melodic, and the air vibrated with a gentle hum of life. The attic waited, familiar and still, its little window glowing faintly with the promise of calm. Mr. Calloway greeted me with a nod, his eyes reflecting the quiet joy of anticipation. "The set has chosen something patient for us today," he said. "It moves slowly, but it will linger if we let it." We settled on the rug, letting the hush of the attic gather around us. The television flickered, a soft amber glow spreading across the wooden beams. Slowly, a scene emerged, a hillside garden kissed by morning sun, flowers stretching gently toward the light. In the center, a child knelt beside a small fox, coaxing it to drink from a shallow dish. Every movement was deliberate and careful, as if the act itself held sacred importance. I felt the rhythm of patience, the quiet weight of care, ripple through the room. Mr. Calloway murmured, "Even in the smallest acts, there is depth. Life grows in quiet attentiveness." The scene shifted to a narrow street in a distant village, where a baker handed out loaves of bread to a line of waiting children. Each loaf was offered with a smile, each hand extended carefully, as though the world itself depended on these small gestures of generosity. Outside, the air shimmered faintly with early sunlight, and I felt warmth gather in my chest. Mr. Calloway leaned back, voice low and soft. "Notice how patience and attention shape everything," he said. "The world listens to those who notice. Even the smallest care reaches further than we imagine." Later, the screen revealed a harbor at dusk, boats rocking gently against their moorings, lanterns floating above the water like drifting constellations. A boy released a lantern, and it rose slowly, catching starlight as it drifted upward. A girl followed, her lantern hovering beside his, their lights mingling in a quiet dance. I felt a deep, calm joy, the kind that settles into the chest and lingers without need for explanation. Mr. Calloway placed a hand on my shoulder. "Even letting go is a kind of attention," he whispered. "Every act, even unseen, matters." Days stretched into weeks, and the attic became a sanctuary where the small miracles of ordinary life unfolded slowly before us. Sometimes the television offered visions of distant forests, children tending animals, or rooftops where cats curled beside sleeping birds. Other times the screen remained dark, leaving us in the hush of quiet conversation, reflecting on life's gentle mysteries. I began to notice these lessons echoing in my own days, pausing to help a neighbor, lingering to listen to a friend, leaving small notes of care for those I might never meet. Each gesture felt like a thread weaving silently through the fabric of the world. One afternoon, the screen revealed a narrow hallway lined with doors painted in soft, sun-warmed hues. Each door contained a fragment of life, a whispered story, a kind gesture, a moment of patience or office. Children peeked through the doors, leaving folded paper birds or quiet messages, while adults moved among them, pausing to notice the small, unnoticed act. I understood then, without words, that the value of life is not measured in grand achievements, but in these gentle, careful movements that shape hearts and worlds. Mr. Calloway's hand rested lightly on mine. "Even what seems small matters," he said. "We carry the world forward in tiny, deliberate steps." The sun dipped low, spilling warm light across the village streets, painting shadows that stretched lazily toward the horizon. We lingered in the attic, letting the glow from the television wash over us. Mr. Calloway spoke softly of memory, of noticing what is fleeting, and of holding small gestures of care close to the heart. "The world whispers in quiet ways," he said. "Notice the pauses, the gestures, the kindness that moves without fanfare. That is the rhythm of life." Walking home beneath a sky turning pale pink and lavender, I felt the threads of all I had witnessed weave through my chest. Lanterns floating across distant waters, foxes nurtured in hidden gardens, bread offered with care, doors holding fragments of lives, each one left a quiet imprint. I imagined them drifting through the streets, through fields, through unseen corners, carried by the same gentle pulse that had guided me to the attic. The world was stitched together with patience, attention, and quiet acts, and I felt privileged to witness even a fraction of its rhythm. That night I lingered at my bedroom window, tracing constellations in the darkened sky. The air carried the faint scent of summer flowers, and the hush of the village pressed close, reassuring and steady. I wrote small notes in my notebook, fragments of thoughts, small reflections, and observations from the day. Sleep came slowly but warmly, carrying me into dreams where lanterns rose endlessly, foxes rested in gardens, bread nourished unseen hearts, and doors held gentle mysteries waiting to be noticed. The calm of the attic followed me, a quiet presence, patient and enduring. As I drifted further into slumber, I whispered a soft thank you for the warmth, for the quiet lessons, and for every small act of care the world holds in secret. Stars blinked softly above the rooftops. The village breathed gently, and somewhere the attic waited, its glow steady and infinite, filled with the echoes of attention, patience, and love that ripple farther than we can see. Summer had settled fully over the village, golden light spilling across cobblestones, gardens brimming with color, and the scent of lavender and warm earth rising gently into the air. I walked to Mr. Calloway's cottage beneath the late afternoon sky, boots soft against the sun-warmed path. Birds traced slow loops above, their songs a quiet rhythm that harmonized with the hush of the world. The attic waited, calm and familiar, its little window glowing faintly as though it knew I would arrive. Miss Calloway greeted me with a nod, eyes soft, warm, carrying the quiet patience of someone who has witnessed countless small miracles. "The set has something for us today," he said, voice low and gentle. "It may linger after we leave." We climbed the ladder together, settling on the rug, letting the hush of the attic gather around us. The television flickered to life, a soft amber glow spreading across the beams, dust motes drifting lazily in the light. Slowly, a village unfolded on the screen, rooftops awash in gold, gardens brushed with the faint scent of jasmine, streets alive with the hush of ordinary moments. Children tended small animals, neighbors shared bread, a cat curled beside a sleeping child, and lanterns hovered in the air like delicate stars. The rhythm of the scene was slow, deliberate, comforting, a quiet heartbeat of attention and care that pulsed through the attic and into my chest. Mr. Calloway's voice was low, almost a whisper. "Notice how the ordinary holds its own kind of magic," he said. "Patience, attention, care. These are the threads that hold everything together." I watched the villagers move, each small gesture filled with intention, realizing that every unnoticed kindness rippled outward in ways beyond sight. Even the simplest actions, a smile, a lifted hand, a carefully folded note, shaped lives like invisible lanterns lighting paths in the dark. The screen shifted to a hilltop, where a young boy planted seeds in a small garden. The fox, now a little larger, watched beside him, moving with gentle curiosity. A girl joined them, carrying water in a slow, steady rhythm, careful not to spill a single drop. Their laughter was soft, measured, full of quiet joy. I felt my chest expand with warmth, understanding that this was not about achievement, recognition, or grandeur, but about being present, about tending life with patience, care, and love. Mr. Calloway rested his hand lightly on my shoulder. "Even when no one is watching," he whispered. "These gestures matter. They echo farther than we can imagine." Later, the screen revealed a hallway lined with doors painted in calm, muted shades. Each door contained fragments of life, whispered stories, acts of care, moments of attention, and quiet patience. Children peeked through, leaving folded paper birds, small notes, or gentle gestures. Adults moved between the doors, pausing to notice, listen, and respond. I felt a deep reverence for the invisible connections between each door, each gesture, and each heart. Mr. Calloway leaned back, eyes reflecting the soft glow of the scene. "Life is stitched together by what is often unseen," he said. "Every kind thought, every careful act, every attentive presence matters. You carry them forward with every step you take." The sun dipped below the horizon, spilling gold and lavender across the village streets. We lingered in the attic, letting the glow of the television wash over us, breathing in the hush of the room. Miss Calloway spoke softly of legacy, memory, and the delicate rhythm of small gestures that persist long after the moment has passed. "We are remembered not always for grandeur," he said, "but for the warmth we leave behind, for the careful, quiet acts that ripple through others. That is the measure of a life well lived." Walking home beneath a sky brushed with stars and soft moonlight, I felt the threads of all I had witnessed stretch through my chest like a living tapestry. Lanterns drifted across, imagined waters, foxes rested in hidden gardens, bread nourished unseen hearts. Doors held whispered stories, and acts of care carried light across the unseen corners of the world. I realized that the journey had always been about noticing, practicing presence, and allowing quiet gestures to ripple outward. Each gentle act, though it might go unseen, carries infinite weight. At home I lingered at my bedroom window, tracing constellations in the darkened sky, feeling the hush of the world settle across the village. The air was thick with the scent of summer blooms and faint earth, the quiet hum of life pressing close. I wrote small notes in my notebook, fragments of observations, whispers of lessons learned, reminders to carry patience, attention, and care into my days. Sleep arrived softly, like a gentle tide, enveloping me in warmth, calm, and reflection. In my dreams, lanterns floated endlessly, foxes rested in gardens, bread nourished unseen hearts, and doors held gentle mysteries waiting to be noticed. The world shimmered with soft light, each quiet act of care weaving a tapestry that was invisible but undeniable. I understood that the attic, the television, and Miss Calloway's lessons were not only in the images I had seen, but in the rhythms I carried within myself, the steady attention to life's quiet miracles, the gentle noticing of small gestures, and the cultivation of kindness that ripples farther than the eye can see. As the night deepened, I whispered a soft thank you for the warmth, the guidance, and every small act of care that the world holds in secret. I imagined the attic waiting patiently, its glow steady, filled with infinite lessons, lanterns, foxes, and gentle gestures, stretching quietly into the lives of others. Sleep claimed me fully, steady and warm, carrying me into the infinite hush of a world stitched together with attention, love, and quiet care. And with that, I stretched into the stars, feeling the pulse of life, kindness, and gentle presence spread through everything I could imagine. Thanks for spending this time with us. Sleep well. Everything's going to be okay, man.